and welcome to Visibility Unlimited and Visibility Unlimited Spotlight, the video portion of Visibility Unlimited, the podcast. I'm Leslie Short, your host and the owner of the Cavu Group. Today we are discussing, should DEI practitioners use data and research? Is it worth it? If so, how? Why? All of that we're going to discuss today, plus a whole lot more. I welcome my two guests. You know, I always love my guests. I'm always so biased, but I really handpick them. So today I welcome Julye Williams and I welcome Mike Sebring. And did I say it correctly, Mike?
That's correct. Thank you.
Wow, because I'm known for butchering a name as well, unfortunately, on here. No fact. Thank you both for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely. So for some of you that may have missed the conference, the two of us plus one other comrade had this conversation last week. And I think we probably could have gone on longer than the 45 minutes that was allotted to us, which was no one else had 45 minutes except for the three of us. And so I know we're special. Anyway, so let's just jump into it. I'm going to start with the same question. Should DEI practitioners be familiar with data and research, yes or no?
Well, I can jump in.
Yes.
Well, hi, everyone, to all the listeners and those who are watching. My name's Julye Williams. I'm the founder of the Project 2043 Institute, and we're a firm that supports companies on their goals for inclusion, diversity, and equity. And so to that question, yes, I do believe DEI practitioners should use data and have access to it.
Mike?
Yeah, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever the time you're listening to this or watching it. I'm Mike Sebring. I head up diversity and inclusion for Citizens Financial Group, been doing this about a decade now, and came out of the business of banking for the past 28 years. And it's funny how your passions catch up to you later in life, but absolutely does data matter. In fact, I often say you have to measure to matter. And what I mean by that is, executive leadership groups specifically respond to data and expect us as D&I practitioners not only to really understand the strategic priorities in the business, but also their data. And that's the driver these days, certainly for us at Citizens, is understanding our key stakeholders, our business outcomes that they're trying to achieve, and what's the intersection between diversity, inclusion, and our data to get to those common outcomes. And I'll talk more about what we've done this year specifically to make that happen.
I think what I'm going to love about this conversation, I hope you all do as well, is you're going to have Mike, who I'm going to call my corporate guy, and he's going to really speak about it from that lens for which he works. And then you have Julye, who is much more non-for-profit and education. And you know me, I'm across the board from entertainment to medical to corporate. And so at the end of the day, I think the conversation is, if you are a DEI practitioner, you do need to understand data and understand research. The question becomes, how do you use it? Because there's so much out there. And it's the how do you use it? And the question I asked before, what's given to you by your client? Realistically, the data that they have chosen, say we didn't have a word in it, does it match with what they're asking you to actually figure out?
Well, I'll jump in here. It's funny how we've collected data, how it's changed, right? Even from 5 years ago, we were focused on hiring, progression of people, internal mobility, those types of things, voluntary turnover. And those are kind of the standard, fair measurement items. And it didn't get much deeper below that, at least that I wasn't being asked for. There wasn't a larger expectation. And now, as I said, where you really understand who your key stakeholders are and what they're trying to achieve, if it's driving revenue, for example, how are you going to design a complementary, advisory way of resourcing and sharing with them around diversity inclusion that supports that. Well, they may have people that they need speed to proficiency, for example, of new employees that they've hired on. And to get them to do that, they need to be engaged. They need to have a really dynamic onboarding program. You need to have different voices and people in the room and make them really feel included and create that sense of belonging if you're going to get that speed to proficiency. So in my mind, there's always a linkage back in some way of whatever they're trying to achieve, especially if it's human capital related, that you can find a way within your toolbox of inclusion and diversity tools to find some data points and show that, again, that you are measuring to matter not only for them, but also you bring the weight of, in our case, the Office of Inclusion to those lines of business to show that we are a benefit to you. You should be reaching out to us for you to achieve, the goals we have in commonality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm always the one that pushes, but I also believe that is great, but does it connect to the people, and does it connect to, and I guess it comes back to what's the version of how they're incorporating DEI within their culture. And so is it, we have the checkbox and we know who's hired and we know who's been onboarded and we know that's great. We have so many of this and so many of that and so many of this, and we've checked those boxes and they're good. Or is it another level, which depends, right? Is there another level of saying they're here? How do we build? They mean any one that they may consider under a diversity, equity, and inclusion umbrella, or a diversity umbrella. Realistically, what does that mean to a company? And then once you're in, are we using the data to say, here's equity, here's assets, here's how you grow within a company? What are you seeing, Julye?
So, as you mentioned earlier, we work mostly with nonprofits and foundations. And so to answer your earlier question before getting to the ones you just asked, a lot of times we see organizations will give us data, who's in the company, their goals, things along those lines, but it's not really actionable. And so our firm, we are educators. So my background is in education. And so we facilitate a lot of professional learning and development along with strategy and implementation support. And so for us, one of the first things we often do is we will administer a survey that's been custom tailored for our clients so that we can actually understand where is it along this, in this sphere of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, what is the sentiment within the organization, looking at feelings of belonging, at psychological safety, at so many of the things that are needed for people to truly feel included beyond just numbers. And so a lot of times for us, the data we initially get isn't data we can actually take action on and actually support and help them achieve their goals. We need to go deeper. And so that's what we tend to find.
Yeah, that is what I would usually read the data, give everything to me, get it off of your computer, get it off of your desk. And I go to your exam, like, I see a line. I see where you would like to go. But in order for me to make it impactful, here's the additional information that I need. So I think as practitioners, we cannot be scared, or nervous to ask for more. Mm-hmm. And it comes down to who's paying for the data, right?
Yep.
Because
the other thing of which I'm just jumping onto what you said, Julye, is a lot of the data we capture, there's lagging indicators, right? It's already happened. I mentioned turnover, progression, those types of things. It's like you can't act on them. To your point, Leslie, what are the leading indicators? We could have, again, onboarding, exit surveys, focus groups. There's many things that you can be doing. That's why you need to have an ongoing listening strategy. Julye mentioned, sentiment. That is probably the number one thing that you can get on a pretty regular basis through your business or employee resource groups or any other, means of getting people together in larger, smaller groups. And to me, that's more important than the number on the back end, because again, I can't do anything about something that already happened.
Right. When was the last time, and Julie, I already know kind of your answer, but maybe you might, when was the last time you were asked to actually participate in the survey in regards to creating it from your lens?
So
For mine
oh,
or
are you,
yours?
Both.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I know, Julie, I know that's something that you do.
oh
I'm
yeah.
curious in corporate, would they come to Mike and say, hey, we need to do this. We need some questions from you, from your lens.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we changed to a different vendor a couple of years ago, and we didn't have inclusion questions before, believe it or not. So we added about 9 of them, and the typical ones. I can speak my mind. I belong here. My manager and/or the company, lives the values and shows how inclusion, diversity come to life. Those types of questions, and then a few other deeper ones that. And the first time we measured them, super high scores, but then you'll see certain groups, Black colleagues, for example, while still really high favorability, less than other groups. So it's digging into those, like the sentiment gathering that we were just talking about is so key to like, why don't you feel the same, right? Some of that we know, I think just, they have a lot more headwinds than others, but what else is under it that we can control within the organization? And this year, one of the things we did were some additional focus groups to get under that with Black colleagues, for example. And then we just had our annual survey. And once again, the scores were extremely high, but there's still those noticeable differences that I will continue, whether it's through listening or, leveraging our HR business partners, those types of things. Like, what can we do better that we can control, to make your experience even better here at work?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to all agree, data and research is not the end all be all. We just can't take it and say, this is it. We got it. We've done it. We're finished. We really have to dig deeper. I think it is that peeling of the onion to say, especially, how I feel about belonging. A company should never tell you belong. You should make that decision you belong. And if people aren't belonging, it's not really up to the company to say, here you belong. It's up to the company to say, here's a culture for where we are allowing you to grow, have your identity, and see where you can be part of this mission and vision. And I think if you give people that space, then they will belong. And, someone had that conversation the other day, but people are taking this belonging personally. And I was like, but it should be personally and not corporate. Can we say thoughts on that? Because data is now trying to I don't know, quantify belonging. I don't know how they're doing that. I'm sure I get 15 calls on companies that are doing it, but I'm not really sure how that works. Any thoughts on that people are taking the belonging too personal and it should be a corporate belonging?
I think belonging is personal. It is personal. It is as who I am, how I show up. Is this a space where I feel that I belong? That is, I think it is personal, absolutely, but it's also a reflection of the corporate culture. And so if I'm in a culture where I feel a sense of belonging and I can be myself, then that's a reflection of what's been created. If I'm in this culture and I don't feel I belong, that's important information for any company to know if you're trying to retain talent and grow and, achieve your goals for your business. That, I think, is a critical data point. So it should be personal. We want to know that.
Right. So collecting data for diversity, collecting data for inclusion, collecting data for belonging, collecting data for equity. Those are all different questions. Thoughts?
So even with belonging, like, what do you measure? Like, what makes up belonging, right? I think there's a handful of things that come to mind because I think of psychological safety as tied pretty closely to belonging, involvement, empowerment, engagement. So, can I report things without fear of retaliation, for example? Can I have open and honest direct communication? Can I, am I encouraged to bring ideas forward about improving the organization? Am I comfortable challenging authority figures? Those are just some things that, I think psychological safety comes to play to create that sense of belonging, that I belong in this location with these people and, I can do those things effectively.
Julie, you agree with that?
I do. And I think there are, to your point earlier about, equity is a different question than accessibility, and it's true, right?
Right.
Accessibility. If I'm asking about belonging, I'm not actually asking about accessibility, unless it's a sense of perhaps I need or am aware of, perhaps maybe accessibility limitations, and that makes me feel like I don't belong because I'm not able to access things in the way that's supportive of my identity. So I think they can be different questions, but they can be very much interrelated.
Absolutely. And with accessibility, my big thing now is I need everyone to just stop saying we're accessible. Are you usable? Because if you can be accessible and is not usable to those that actually need it, then no, you cannot put the A in the rest of your alphabet soup that you're trying to prove to the world that you're doing something.
Right.
And so I think, again, these are conversations that we have, and when our companies, our clients want to measure all of this, I always stop back and go, why do you want to measure this? And once you measure it, or once you have the data, or once you're asking them to ask that question, what do you plan on doing with it?
Yes. Yes.
And
you mentioned accessibility, so it automatically took me to individuals with disabilities. And one of the things that I've really enhanced here recently, when we onboard, for example, some new financial advisors, they're typically going after, like, where's the money at, right? Well, I'm going to go after baby boomers who have big chunks of retirement money and or wealth transfer, this kind of things. And so I share with them, really there's better data out there of finding your niche in some of these niche markets, I guess you say, or emerging markets. For example, people with disabilities, like the wealth availability for that group is extremely large, and people don't understand that or may miss that. Same thing with veteran, LGBTQ, right? I like bringing forward, here's the numbers that equate to those groups that's on the table. And if you relate to some of those groups, the opportunity to use that data to your benefit, to not only know about them, what are their needs, wants, desires, pain points, then when you meet with that type of a client, you build that trust and can get the business. So again, trying to tie everything back to the business is so key. So it's not just focused on women in POC, which is where I think that a bulk of the conversation when people think about diversity and inclusion lies, is broadening that aperture to generational now, certainly, and then geographical, political. There's so many aspects, as we know, within diversity, like which ones make sense for you to quantify and will help you achieve the goals you've set for yourself.
Oh, I love that, because you do have to break it out. You can no longer just say, I have Hispanic, because maybe someone identifies as Latino or Latinx. That's generational. You have to break down, and then why do you identify the way that you identify? How do we have that conversation? And once you have the data, it's also who is having the conversation once you go into these marketplaces. Because I think sometimes you do get great data, and then the messenger with the data misses the point, because they're reading a piece of paper as opposed to what they have. How do you connect it now to those you're trying to serve? And so when we look at data, when we look at research, it is connecting all those dots in order for it to make sense.
Yeah. This is something I shared when we were at the conference last week, but what you're saying makes me think about how in the past I would become frustrated when people would look at, a report from, a very large foundation and ignore what people in the office have been telling them about that very same problem. And so what you're talking about is kind of like this, I don't know if I don't want to give it a classification, but it might be unwillingness, might be unawareness, might be unacceptance, or, it's not in the format that makes sense for me. So I'm not going to see it or hear it as data unless it's coming from a report by this, organization. Right. And so I think similar to what you were saying earlier, Mike, about, there's ongoing data we can collect specifically about sentiment and other things. And so sometimes that data is in the building And it's with our partners, it's with the communities we're serving, it's with our customers, and it's not coming in a spreadsheet or on a PDF, it's coming in conversations. And so I think sometimes that can be a miss if we're not really aware of all the ways in which we can gather data to help us.
And I think that's what it's so important that you gather multiple sources of truth so you can triangulate, several sources of information to validate those findings. And in our case, many times is like uncover the root cause to the problem. I think one good example of, with the advent of or acceleration of artificial intelligence, you've got all these great platforms, ChatGPT, Gemini, you name it. And well, that information, some of it may be truth. I know it's still, I think there's a lot of validation going on to make sure that the information you get is useful and truthful. But even then, I would say, and this is something my team's doing, that let's go to these different platforms. Let's prompt the same type of question and see if you get a similar answer. Because even just prompting could be different, right? If I say I'm acting as a chief diversity officer, I want to know more about inclusion and diversity. Or instead of I say, if I'm a chief marketing officer, I want to know more about inclusion and diversity. You may get two very different answers just because you prompted of who you are asking the question. And you could create either some biases on yourself, not get the information you want, obviously. But I think understanding the best way to find the information, how to ask for it properly, and using some of the new tools, like I just mentioned, to accelerate the data gathering process.
I love that. I always say one of anything. Who eats one cookie? Who eats one chip?
I mean,
okay. Who eats one M&M? We don't. So why would you take and base everything off of one source?
Yeah.
And I love when someone goes, oh, I want to do all these focus groups and let's start hiring everyone. And I do a lot of focus groups and I'm like, have you done an internal focus group? No, we want to do external. Okay. Don't worry. We're going to do external. Have you done internal? It goes to what you say, Julie. The people that's actually working every day and has seen this product grow, if it's a product or whatever you're trying to get, they have feelings about it. They have thoughts about it. And why don't you listen to them as they have heard the evolution of what's going on? Or for some of them, depending on age and time there, have lived the evolution.
Yeah.
And so isn't it crazy that you hire people to come in and do things and they are brilliant and shiny when they're hired, and all of a sudden they're not so smart when you need need them to actually give you feedback?
Yeah, with all the wealth of experience that they can bring with them.
Yes.
I think it's great to catch people typically at least around the 2-year time frame that, okay, they've lived some experience, they've passed the honeymoon stage, and like, how are they really feeling? Because it's between that 2 and 5 year, at least this is the experience I'm seeing, that people decide to stay or leave, right?
Yes.
Of an organization. So if you can catch them soon enough and find what the data that's causing their pain point or exciting them, how do you amplify that or make things better? Another pitfall I would mention that just came to mind was oftentimes we aggregate data, right? I think we say people of color, and then you've got an overconcentration of, let's say, Asian that typically falls in line culturally with white responses, certainly on some surveys. Again, things I've seen. And so if you're not disaggregating that information, you're not telling the full story, obviously, but your numbers might look better if you just bundle POC. This happens all the time, especially for external reporting, to make things look better on external reports. Not saying that we do that, but there's always a resistance to like, how much are you willing to open the kimono fully to your stakeholders externally, even to tell the story? And I think that's why it's so important that you do have lots of good data points and references to showcase, hey, we're doing good stuff here, but we got more work to do.
Well, I think that's where it comes down to where our industry is today, right? It was, oh my goodness, I'm going to hire a head of DEI. Oh my God, find a Black woman. Oh, okay, you have no training in this? Who cares? I have a head of DEI. And everyone got excited. no tools, no money, no backup, no, just throwing people to the wolves. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, the wolves aren't doing anything. Well, can we do a survey? Ooh, that's going to cost. Oh, can we do that? Oh, just count people. Just count them, just throw them all together. And so there was this lack of actually really wanting to pull true data, but more do look what we have. Not even what we're doing, look what we have. And now when you look at the polls of our industry, what has happened? It went from here, spiked up, we're spiked down, and where we're going in the world at this moment, and there's so much conversation about DEI, good, bad, or indifferent, depending on who you speak to, right? And culture. I'm always like, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. People are here, and people have feelings, and people have thoughts. How are we going to move forward? How is using data going to maybe change in order to, I hate to say this, justify almost why this is still important work? Thoughts? I know that was a big one.
So data is something I'm really interested in. It's one of the reasons why I started the company. So our name is Project 2043, and the name comes from the Census Bureau's projection that in the year 2043, the majority of people living in the US would identify as a person of color. And so when we look at, and I looked at that projection many years ago and look at how our country is evolving, I think data is still going to be highly relevant for companies, whether we're looking at the workforce and who is being hired, because we know we are the youngest generations now are far more racially diverse than older generations. And so what is the impact of that on our workforce? I think when looking at the services and products we're offering, making sure that they are relevant to communities of increasingly diverse identities. And then also looking at the customers we're serving. So we also have we'll have a far more diverse customer base. And so I think for companies and this I think goes back to Mike, what you said earlier, like looking at, or maybe it was in our pre-conversation, but looking at their bottom line, how does inclusion and equity and diversity impact their business opportunities? I think understanding the data, who your market is, who your staff are, what you're offering, I think that's critical to know. I think as things evolve, I tend to sometimes have a doomsday moment and, assume the worst. And, one of those things is, are we still going to collect data, in the ways that we have been? Are we still going to be allowed to do so? So just, not to be negative, but
No. But these are conversations I think we need to have as practitioners together, because I think everyone has been so, for lack of a better word, segmented in their own world trying to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to have conversations together. Like, what are you being asked? What's happening in your world? How can we help each other build this together? This is a true industry. This is very important work. But I think if we continue to work in silos, it's easier to dismiss it.
Yeah.
And so how do we share the data? Your company may not want to dig down in the onion anymore. They may be like, listen, you're here, be happy, give me that checklist. But you call one of us and we're like, okay, my client dug a little deeper. Here, use this in the meeting. We have to figure this out.
We think there's just as many proponents for this work, I think, as naysayers. And I say that because I get many RFPs throughout the year for, citizens to do business or with, say some city's payroll, for example, or they have, some kind of product that they want from us. So they're asking us, what will you provide me in the way of that product? Oh, and by the way, I want to know what you're doing around diversity and inclusion. That's in many of the RFPs that I have to fill out. So having those really solid examples of impact that we're making, whether it's in the community through workforce development or financial literacy, or the stuff that's happening inside and how we're trying to diversify the workforce, is super important to them, right? So it's useful to the business, and what helps with that, and we're all filling out all these surveys to get, Human Rights Campaign 100% and disability in. To me, those questions that are asked in those surveys are a way to audit. Are you doing what the external market thinks are impactful items to drive disability inclusion or LGBT inclusion? So I don't look at those as long tasks, but it helps tell the story. It holds me accountable to, what others are saying are important. And it also helps me fill in the blanks when we're asked to fill out some of these RFPs for business. So much of this stuff, it ties around, it's not, well, and obviously attract talent, right? For like our external career site to have all those awards that you've won. So there's multiple ways that you can take, certain groups of information and use it for different purposes. That's what I found is to be super useful in, repurposing data as well.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I will always say this, it'd be written on my tombstone that I'm not going to have. Your insides and your outsides must match. You can't do all this amazing things on the outside, and then on the inside, there's folks that have disabilities that are trying to get hired and don't get hired because they have a disability. There's, I'm going to use the stereotypical story. The Black woman is trying to get promoted, and they tell her to go back and get 15 degrees. And maybe, the Latino person is like, I don't want to be someone's assistant. I have 15 degrees. Can I just move to a different department? And that internal fight, those barriers will be down. Not because of data, but because the fact that you use the data to open the door, continue to use the data for growth. And, that's why I may be a little Pollyanna on that, but that is what my focus and purpose is, because it comes back to what is the culture that you are trying to build. And if you have a culture of equity, which is access to things and growth, then you will automatically have diversity. You don't have to go look for it. And I don't know, I hate to say look for it. Diversity is not a thing you look for. Let me clarify that. But people will see the work that you're doing and want to invest in the work with you. And you will diversify your workforce internally and in the projects you do externally.
Well, you mentioned people with disabilities. A really, I think, fascinating data point. Obviously, I think it's 5% less unemployed than non-disabled person, right? But when you do employ someone, the retention of those individuals is extremely high. So it's, knowing those kind of things, when we work with our talent acquisition team, for example, they're transitioning to less of a recruiting hat to a talent advisor hat. So whether it's, inclusive hiring practices that they understand and help hiring managers understand, like the veterans, for example, what's a G7? How does that equate to a transferable piece of work that you're hiring for, or someone with a disability, if they have some type of a ADHD, or, what am I trying to think of? Autism. What kind of role can they do that you need, that they can do here at the organization? So it's being able to use that information, the data, the research, to share with hiring managers to diversify the workforce. But I agree, it's like inclusion is what you do and diversity is what you get, right? And equity is what you want. And I stole that from somebody else, obviously. But I love that definition.
Absolutely. And look, we have to also know, again, that there is not one size fits all. So as you're sitting across, and that comes back to how we work with the managers and HRs, what questions are being asked? Because those questions in hiring, also those questions on a data or a survey, make a difference. Who's asking them, how they're being asked, as you go back to that, And the fact that it's not one size fits all. Someone that has autism, everyone is not the same. Every disability is not the same. Every Black person, white person, yellow person, and green person, we're all different. Though we're looking to fill a role, can you look beyond just what's on that check piece of paper and see who's in front of you? And I think that's where data is great to have for what you may be looking for. The human being has to know what you're seeing.
Mhm.
No.
I think another thing that's so important as we talk about data and DEI, I have found is having a clear direction, a clear goal, a clear vision, because I think without that, it's really hard to actually use the data because we don't know what we're trying to actually shift or move toward or how to even read it, right? And so I think a lot of times I've seen companies, at least in the last several years, like wanting to do something, but really not putting a stake in the ground as far as where they want to go and being clear on that why and what it means for the organization. And so it's as we're talking, I'm just going through my mind, just thinking about how important it is to have that direction, to have that vision of inclusivity so that with the data, we can help organizations get there.
Absolutely. And the definition of what diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, culture, what does that mean to the company? What's your definition of that?
Mm-hmm.
So that the mission and vision can come alive through the why. And again, it's the same thing about we can have all the things in the world, but if they're not usable, we just have things. I think that's called Hoarders. Is that the show that you do that? I don't know.
Time to clean out the house.
You have a lot of things, but nothing comes together.
Yep,
it's true though. My boss always says she doesn't believe in best practices, right? And I'm saying, well, there are some proven practices, right? You can't throw at everything. Some things work. Speaking of that, Leslie, you know, when I mentioned our Office of Inclusion, that was part of our evolution of the work we've been doing over the past 5 years that I've been here. And again, it was to obviously open the aperture, I said, for, you know, everybody to be part of the conversation, but also to create like a multiplier effect for, you know, I've got a team of 5 around me, but we, you know, 19,000 colleagues across the US. That's not enough. So how do we create more of ourselves to educate them on what's true? What should they be measuring? What should they be paying attention to? So they can do the work within their business lines versus us trying to do it all and chase it down, right? So it's a challenge. And by doing that, we're coming to them, providing them data and information to get them going. And we hold a quarterly inclusion forum where I bring those folks into the room. We have, you know, I give them an update. We give them an opportunity to share back and forth. And, you know, we work through some of those challenges, but that's worked out really well for us, just having those regular touch points with those individuals in the business to do the work for us. And going back to what Julye said, if they understand your strategy around inclusion and diversity, you know, then they're not going off the rails and doing something that doesn't align to what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
And I think
it's less noisy. It's less noisy. Yeah. You're not listening to all the other stuff going around. You're really clear. I like that.
And I would add to that, I think having that clarity helps promote buy-in.
Yes.
Because if we don't know where we're going, what are we doing?
And we have to allow people to say, you know what, I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't get it. I have no problem when I do things. I'm like, raise your hand, tell me, shake your head. No, I don't believe in this. Let's have that conversation, because then it's my job to try to figure out what's that connection. How do I connect it so you care about something? Enough to do your job is what I always say.
Well, you will also expose people that are not engaged for whatever reasons. They don't believe in it. You know, this is a nice to have, whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, when I have to go report to the CEO or the executive team and a certain line of business maybe doesn't have any examples of anything that they've done, to me, you know, a little embarrassment can go a long ways sometimes to motivate them, because I can only influence them. Right? There's folks with bigger badges than myself that are doing the work. So I can only do so much. But on paper, or, you know, showing, hey, your peer is doing this really great job, and you haven't done anything, can motivate people to,
Absolutely.
to act.
And the bottom line motivates people.
Mhm.
Let's just be honest. If you have figured out how to tap into markets that are beneficial to your bottom line, you figure out a way to make sure you have people in place that can continue to communicate with those communities in a way that they stay invested and you stay invested. And so I always love the department that doesn't quite understand their investment in the bigger investment. And when their numbers don't quite add up because they don't want to do something, you're right. That embarrassment, unfortunately, can change things. I don't want to embarrass people, though. I want you to understand why other people are important. That's all I ask. Can we just be very basic with this sometimes? I don't know. So speaking about being, I hate to say very basic about it, where do we go from here? Things will maybe change or going to change. The world changes, so we know things will change. What we don't have crystal balls. What would you like to see from our industry? Maybe that's a different question.
I'll let Julie go.
Oh.
I mean, at a very base level, I want to see our industry continue. I want to see our industry continue to grow and impact organizations and teams and, corporations, because it is about seeing people for people. And I think one of the beautiful things about working in this industry is that we work to create space for people to be seen, for people to be to have opportunity and access to thrive. And so what I would like to see for our industry is for us to continue to do that in significant and deeper ways. Now, there's also the reality outside, but right now we're talking about, what's in my mind and in my heart. So that's what I would say.
I love that. Thank you.
I would just add, I think especially now, right? So we just came off of a very polarizing election here in the United States, is to heal, help people heal and bring people together, right? We saw post George Floyd, the acceleration of this work. And then it's been a roller coaster, right? With different Supreme Court cases and so forth that have come in that have really changed the lexicon, the narrative, the focus, and I've been, we've all been part of it. And now we have this really interesting moment in time that how do we not negate people's feelings and their belief systems and opinions, but, feelings are not facts. So I think in some cases we want to bring people together, but we need to stay, diligent in pushing back on unvalidated opinions and rhetoric through some of the facts and research that we've been talking about, whether that's, historical information and what we can predict to be true. But for me, the more we can do storytelling and bringing in different voices and showcasing the humility and empathy of people and leaders from internal and external, different sources, I think will provide some of that healing, that we're not all different. We're in this together, and there's more common sources of commonality than differences. So that's my hope, and that's what I'm going for.
Thank you. I mean, the reality is there's a big enough pie for all of us that no one's trying to take the pie and run. For some reason, that has been, a thought process, that we are all in this together, but we are at different levels in the boat, and recognizing that we are on different levels in the boat. And that regardless of the level that you may be at, if you are in the boat, then you are worthy of a voice within that boat. And that is one of the things I am hoping that at some point, it is the humanity of each other. It is the talent for which people bring. It is the not holding anyone back because they are considered under the diversity umbrella, whether it's disability, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whether it's LGBTQ plus. I hate to break it to folks, veterans are under this umbrella. So let's be very clear that we're not erasing something for nothing and not allowing people to really have opportunities to grow as a human being, as a worker, as a citizen. That is what this work is. I'm not sure where it got lost in a whole bunch of other stuff, but the work is real and it's for each of us. If one is strong, I think many can be strong. Want to end on a good note. Our good note is we are here. We will continue to fight the good fight. There's a lot to do. Julye, where can people find you?
You can find us online. You can visit our website at project2043.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Julye, Julye Williams.
Thank you. Mike?
And I don't have my own personal website. I'm a little jealous, but yeah, LinkedIn, and I don't have my like LinkedIn information. But if you look at my picture now and you look for Michael Sebring or Mike Sebring on LinkedIn, you'll uncover me. That's Citizens Bank.
And that's okay. I will definitely tag when I send out. I will send out a newsletter, so I'll make sure that both your LinkedIn is part of that. And if you can't find them, you can always reach out to me. I can't say thank you enough. We're going to do this every week, like this.
Let's do it.
I'm starting to feel something here.
Our weekly meetup.
Our weekly meetup.
Our therapy session.
Once a month, we may have to do this. I want to thank you both again. Everyone, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is Visibility Unlimited, the Spotlight. Listen to the podcast, Visibility Unlimited. You can catch us on YouTube at the Cavu Group channel. As always, see you soon, and thank you.